From Studio P in Sausalito, the home of the hit, it's time for...
Succotash.
Yes, Succotash, the comedy soundcast featuring snippets from comedy.
Soundcast.
And also interviews with comedians, comedian soundcasters, and other showbiz folk. And now, here's your host, internationally recognized comedy soundcaster, Marc Hershon.
Thanks, Bill Heywatt. It sounds like you've put together a slightly different new introduction for the show. Is that in honor of our 10 years of soundcasting together? Bill? Bill? Wow. I guess he's already out of the booth. When that guy clocks out, that's it. But really, listener, you're the one that matters most in this Succotash equation. Glad to have you with us, or me. I'm Marc Hershon, your every other weekly host, and this is episode 252 of the Comedy Soundcast. Did you catch my partner in clips Tyson Saner on last week's installment? Epi252 featured snippets from a trio of soundcasts, The Worst Movies Ever Played, Thought Spiral, and Bob Saget's Here For You. You can still catch it in all the usual downloady spots like Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and our own damn home site, succotashshow.com. I don't have clips for you this week. Even better, I have an interview with the very delightful Wayne Federman. Wayne's an old buddy and a friend of the show, and he's just put out a new book, The History of Stand-Up. We'll get to my chat with Wayne in a moment or two. I hope you're doing well. This past Sunday was Mother's Day, and it was the first chance I've had to try out my fully vaccinated body when my family got together for the first time in over a year to take Mom out for brunch. It was nice to be with everybody, sitting in a restaurant, masks off, and just hanging out. It felt like 2019. If you've gotten vaxxed up yourself, I hope you've had a chance to finally see friends and loved ones and are feeling like things are almost like normal again. All right, enough jibber-jabber. This is an extra long episode of the show. These days, Tyson and I try to keep these zipping along at about a half an hour, so this is more like the old Succotash where we'd go on for an hour or more, but Wayne and I were having a good chat, and I didn't want to slice and dice it all up, so you're getting it all. At the far end, we'll have a word from our sponsor, Henderson's Pants, and their new Wake Island abbreviated trousers. And we'll take a quick dunk in the tweet sack as well. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy my gabble with Mr. Wayne Federman.
You sound a little echoey.
I am, because I'm doing this in my wife's office. My office doesn't have these echoes, but I can't use hers. So this is, if I had a studio like I have depicted behind me, it'd be fantastic. But
yeah, okay.
But I don't. It'll be fine.
All right.
It'll be fine, I bet.
Thank you for thinking of me at all. I love it.
Absolutely. I've been hearing about your book, The History of Stand-Up. Of course, big fan of everything that led up to this book.
Yep.
And I actually I got the idea to call you because I heard you on with the Sklar brothers.
Yep.
Last week, and I said, well, if he's going to talk to the Sklars, Wayne will talk to me. He's been on the show before. We're friends.
I'd be happy to. What are you talking about?
And I've gotten through the first couple of chapters. I just literally got the book like yesterday.
Okay.
So, apologies for not having read the entire thing.
Okay. Well, there's only 10 chapters in it. It's not that big. It's not that crazy a book.
No, but I have a day job.
Of course.
But then I flipped to the acknowledgments as soon as I got through the first couple of chapters. Just a lot of names I find familiar there.
Let's just do a breakdown of the acknowledgments page. Whatever you want to do. I don't care. It's just stupid. The whole thing's stupid.
No, it's...
I don't have my book in front of me. Should I go get it to refer to it? Okay.
No, we're just going to have a conversation. It's not that
Let's
important.
do it.
Reference these things.
All right.
Wayne Federman is with us on Succotash. We've already started, but that's okay. It doesn't matter.
Of course. I like the way we do it casually.
Absolutely. It's funny. One of the things that you guys talked about when you were with the Sklars was the idea of missing that hanging out in a club, after the show or before the show, where you're out in the front, like at the Improv in the dining area, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And it reminded me, you and I see each other maybe once every couple of years, 3 years maybe, but there's a thing amongst the comedy community that it kind of doesn't matter how much time has gone by or has passed. It gives you time to catch up on things. But
I don't think that's unique to the comedy community, though. But I'd like the way that you make it thing like, oh, no one else catches up or has old friends. Why is that unique in any way to the comedy community?
I guess it isn't unique, except it is one of the only communities where there are these weird gathering spots where people do meet. You can meet at work, you can meet at a coffee house, that sort of thing. But a comedy club is where comedians end up meeting.
That is true. That is true. Comedians do hang out at comedy clubs.
Yeah. So hence the phenomenon to comedians, I guess. Anyway. It just made me think that the few times that we've run into each other in the last handful of years have been, it's been easy to just sort of catch up on things. You were with me on the podcast we did with Dana Carvey.
Yes.
And things like that.
Thank you again for getting me on that podcast. It was so fun. I just am in awe of that guy's talent, and his kids seem super funny, and just they riff like crazy. It's so great.
Yeah, and he's done 10 episodes of his new podcast called Fantastic.
Uh-huh.
And it's currently on hiatus. He's working on another project, but he swears he's coming back with it. But it's really him doing the way I think of him, because he and I wrote a lot together, and just him riffing, and without any sort of control, without anybody telling him what to do or how to be funny. And it's great to hang out with someone like that. That just
that's what I'm saying. It was incredible to be on the show with them. I agree. He is a next level riffer.
Yes,
he's incredible.
How have you been doing with the pandemic situation?
Well, I'll tell you. One, basically, all holed up the whole time in my house.
Okay.
Didn't go to one dinner at a restaurant, even when they were kind of like outdoor restaurants.
Yeah.
Didn't do any of that stuff. I just didn't want to be the last person to die of COVID. That was my goal. I had a very simple goal. So I did that. And now last month, because I don't know if you know this, but I also teach at USC. They provided me with 2 shots of a vaccination. I like to use the word inoculation.
Okay.
Nobody uses that anymore, but I like to I'm inoculated with the Pfizer company plus their German buddies. Do you remember the name of that company they teamed up with?
No, I don't remember.
No, all right. I didn't think so, Mark. I didn't think you're not, all right.
Do you remember?
No, I don't, but I know it was a German company. I know there's a thing. It wasn't just Pfizer, but so they gave me my shots, so I'm inoculated.
Nice.
And
I am fully vaxxed with the Pfizer serum as well.
Yeah.
I also use serum, something they don't often use these days.
Right. The serum. The antidote.
Exactly. So it's interesting because just looking again, just referencing the acknowledgments here. The first we really acknowledge are the folks at Vulture. Meg
no
Wright.
Question. Meg no
Wright.
Question.
But do you remember who introduced you to the people at Vulture?
Are you saying it's you?
It was me.
You got me? Okay.
Yes.
Are you sure about this?
Yes, because we were talking. I think we were in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And we were talking, and you said, I've got this idea for these articles I want to write.
Oh, my God. You're the guy.
And
you should have been acknowledged before they.
Doesn't matter.
I get it. I see what's happening.
No. But the fact matter, and that it seriously does not matter to me. But what I love about it is that spark led to this road that you've been down with first the articles, and then you had your podcast.
But let me back up a little bit because it wasn't Vulture at that time.
No, it was
Split Cider. Split Cider.
That's right. and then they got gobbled up.
Oh my God, I feel terrible now.
No.
You should be the number one acknowledged thing.
No,
Meg.
No.
How did you know Meg? Okay, now we're really deep diving.
That's okay. Okay, so here's what happened. So
how do you know Meg?
Okay, so we just celebrated the 10th anniversary of Succotash, by the way.
Congratulations.
Yeah, we started in 2011.
I'm glad it was on the anniversary episode. Thank you very much. That felt good. That feels good.
Absolutely. 2012, the end of 2012, I get a message from Jesse Fox, who at the time was editing This Week in Comedy podcast. And he said, hey, I've been listening to your show, and I know you listen to a lot of podcasts. Would you have any interest? Do you have any history of writing? Would you like to review? I said, yeah, sure. So it was free. They didn't pay us for.
Of course. Yeah.
Anyway, so
day job you mentioned earlier on.
Of course.
Yeah.
And podcasting doesn't, not paying a whole lot these days. But anyway, so Jesse ends up moving along. I mean, he's still there, but he gets booted upstairs or moved along, or I forget exactly what happened. I think he left Splitsider to go to New York Magazine, and then they ended up.
Wait, so Jesse was at Splitsider?
He was at Splitsider.
Okay, this is, guys, again, I know there's 3 people listening and 2 of them are about to turn this off. But this is some origin story here.
Yes.
Let's do this. This is some Joseph Conrad.
Yeah, so
Jesse was at Splitsider. Meg's at Splitsider.
But Jesse takes off and Meg takes over as the editor for This Week in Comedy podcasts. And then New York Magazine, as vulture.com, which is their arm, they end up purchasing Splitsider. So
so they just bought the whole thing.
They bought the whole thing. So Meg and Jesse end up back together again. But Meg is now the editor. And then you say, hey, I've got this idea for an article. Do you have any connections over at Splitsider? Because I think you knew I was doing reviews there or something. I can't remember.
I don't know. I think you might have brought it up because I don't know if I was aware there was This Week in Comedy podcasts or anything like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, so I greased the skins.
I feel terrible.
No. Like I said, to me, I'm just fascinated to see the spark that happened. And then all these things you've done from it that relate to it is just, it's really cool to see.
I know. And that might have been at the Improv, right?
I think it was.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's where the fuse was lit.
So, and then I wrote Meg and I pitched her that idea, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And then I remember when Jess Guinevere sent me a note because she's been in contact with me because she's a PR person. And she goes, hey, I got this great podcast starting with Wayne Federman. I said, I know about everything you're about to tell me about. And of course I'll review it. So I think I reviewed your first episode for Splitsider for This Week in Comedy podcast.
But she was not my publicist.
She was.
I think you might be getting that wrong.
But she was a publicist, and maybe she was. You know what? I think she may have published.
This could be the most boring podcast of all time. Just you trying to remember what Jess was doing.
Anyway, at any rate, it's unimportant. It's unimportant. The important thing is that you started down this road of teaching people about stand-up comedy and the history of stand-up comedy. And it's just, reading even just the first couple of chapters of your book, I'm fascinated by the forefathers of stand-up. I mean, I'd only heard 2 of those guys.
Right. I assume you've heard of Mark Twain and Will Rogers would be my guess. Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Burt Williams, I could. And obviously nobody knows Artemis Ward. Even I didn't. I wrote that. I was like, I had never heard Artemis Ward. And like, this is my thing, comedy is stand-up history. So, that's all Rich Scheidner. That's all the great comedian Rich Scheidner.
What a
he turned me on to that dude, made the case, and I was like, you have convinced me.
That is something. One of the things, and again, this is minutia in your book. There was an element you talk about the cakewalk contest?
Yes. Okay. No. He helped popularize the cakewalk, which was a kind of a dance craze.
But you know where that came from, the cakewalk?
Yeah, I'm assuming it was a competition where you won a cake.
Yes.
And if I'm not mistaken, it turned into like African Americans sort of making fun of upper class white people would be my guess. Am I close?
It's no.
What is it?
Well, I learned this from Franklin Ajay, who is a very great comic. And he and I were working on a screenplay together, and it was set, the origin of the screenplay is set in 1859. So we had to do all this research about slaves and plantations and whatnot. And the cakewalk was a thing that happened on the plantation where they would have, the slaves would do this sort of promenade or procession around the yard. And it was whoever did the most crazy, amazing dance would get this cake awarded by the plantation owner. So it was a very slave sort of thing when it started out, which was rather interesting.
Okay, so it wasn't, but in a way, weren't they making fun of like the way upper class plantation owners? I think that's what.
I think that's probably right. That probably makes sense. Yeah. So I think it's all together. Anyway,
I'm seeing there's some great old film footage of cakewalking.
Yes.
Like it's some of the earliest footage. Yeah.
Yeah. As you've done more and more research into this, and I think I heard you saying, and it may not have been on the Sklar's, that your research is kind of collected from talking to people like Scheidner and things like that, that you're not kind of in the depths of some archive somewhere digging through old.
Well, I was. I mean, some of it is, I mean, especially to USC, I was able to, when I was preparing for my course, I was really able to use their library system, which connects with all the major college library systems. So you get Princeton, you get it's incredible. The access I got as, just with my teacher ID number or whatever it is, however I get access to this stuff, that would cost a lot of money. So yes, I have for years. I've been studying the history of stand-up since the 70s. I've been writing about it since, I don't know, when did it, 10 years now, I guess. Maybe not 10 years, maybe 8 years, yeah. But I've always been a nut for it.
And as you've gotten deeper into it, does it keep sort of revealing facets you didn't know, like the Artemis character and things like that?
Yeah, Artemis Ward, and there's especially like within the last 3 years, I've learned about Marshall P. Wilder. Never heard of the guy.
Wow.
And now, he's very much, I hate to say it, like me. He was a comedy historian as well as a comedian, and he did shows in something called Chautauquas, which are traveling educational shows, and then got into vaudeville. And he was a little person, now they call it. But at that time, he called him a hunchback dwarf, was how he described himself. So he really is like this self-made man. And then I find out that he's the first person to ever record comedy onto a disc, which he did as part of a demonstration for Thomas Alva Edison's.
No kidding.
Yeah, that's 1888, I believe.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
There's no copy of that recording, but there is newspaper accounts of him recording it and then playing it back for all the newspaper reporters.
Oh, imagine if you could find a copy of that, though.
That would be incredible. That would be like Eddie Murphy's ice cream routine or something. It would be incredible.
What is the oldest recording that you have listened to, that you've heard? Have you been able to find
of comedy?
Of comedy, yeah.
Oh, I haven't really done that. I haven't really tried to. One of the big hit records very early on was something called The Laughing Song, which was just this guy who had a very infectious laugh. And that was a big seller. So I don't know. Does that count as a comedy record? I think it does, because people were listening to it and laughing. So
yeah, why wouldn't it?
Yeah. Sure. So the bar was pretty low. Let me put it that way. The bar was low.
Maybe you reached this conclusion in the book, and I'm sorry I haven't gotten all the way through it, but let's talk about the idea of, do you see things come around again? That, because you talk about sort of the primordial beginnings of comedy, but as it's gotten sort of more sophisticated and created its form and things like the setup and punchline and things like that, do things sort of come around again like fads sometimes do?
I don't really look at it that way. I look at comedy as especially stand-up, which is kind of what I know you keep talking about comedy in general, but I kind of focus just on somebody on stage trying to get people laughing.
Yeah, and that's what I'm referring to. It's really
I find that the basic idea of it hasn't really changed. The basic idea of like, oh, I got to get laughs. Is it more sophisticated now? Is it more intellectual? Yes, of course. But that hasn't really changed. What does change is the jargon, the local references, the what's going on in the news, how people speak, what phrases are taboo and then suddenly not taboo, subject matter, all of that changes. So you can tell a lot from a comedian just by listening to what they're saying. You're like, oh, this is obviously from the 90s. I meant the 1990s. This is from the 1940s. You can just tell because there's World War II references. So comedy, I hate to say it, stand-up comedy is a very generational art form. It, as a rule, does not travel over time very well at all, i.e. the laughing song. So it's like, that's just the nature of it. I mean, I have this discussion all the time. Like when we were starting out, people were just like, is Mort Saul really funny? I don't get, compared to what Dennis Miller was doing. So and it's a subjective art form. So some people are like, I love Jack Benny. Other people are like, could he be slower? I can't deal with this. It's like, so you have that going on. Yeah, so I try not to get into, I get into the people that made a big contribution, but I don't get into like whether I think they're funny or they're, it's just, I think there's no way you can talk about the history of stand-up and not mention what Bob Hope did, whether you think he's funny, and so that's just the nature of it.
It's very contextual. I mean, when I was a kid, when I was in junior high school, I always listened to old radio shows at night because a station in San Francisco played them. Yep. And it's funny because
what years is this? Because do you want to give away your age, or is this a thing?
Sure. This is like 72, 71, 72.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. And it was interesting because you could start to feel the context of those times, of the 40s. And I was a huge fan of the Marx Brothers and W.C. Fields.
Well, the Marx Brothers, you hit the Marx Brothers, they had this huge revival in the early 70s. That movie Animal Crackers was released for the first time in decades for some reason. I don't know. I don't know if there was a rights situation. So that played college campuses, and then they would play Duck Soup on college campuses. Like, oh, it's like an anarchy, anti-war movie. Like, what's going on here? We're in the middle of Vietnam. So you caught that wave in a big way. But I'll say, I feel like the Marx Brothers on radio was never as good as they were in films. What do you think? What do you think?
No. I mean, they were a physical act. I mean, Groucho Marx learned to be funny as a one-man show, as a stand-up, essentially, or a storyteller. Not really a stand-up, more of a storyteller. But as a group, as a group of performers, I don't think they worked very well from an audio standpoint. I mean,
I know they did those. Yeah, I'm trying to think what the name of that radio show they did, but it wasn't. But anyway, keep talking. So you would listen to these shows, and you listen to Marx Brothers on radio? Is this what your point was?
No, my point was I would listen to kind of the regular old radio shows, and some of them were Jack Benny and Fred Allen and people like that. But there was The Shadow and,
classic comedy shows. Yep, The Shadow.
But that wasn't comedy, and neither was
I know, it was a suspense show, I know.
Yeah.
And there was something called Suspense, believe it or not.
But listening to that stuff and the commercials and the news of the day kind of put me in the context of it. So when I would listen to comics from back then, I would start to, like, I always found Bob Hope very funny. And part of it was because I knew the references. Sometimes if you listen to like English comics, you go, I don't know who they're talking about. They're making jokes about politicians and celebrities, and you don't know who they are.
Right.
And listening to an old comic like that, listening to Bob Hope do something from the 40s, you're going, I'm not sure who half these people are he's talking about. But the idea you can put yourself in the context and understand the jokes better made him funnier to me than he might be to somebody who's more contemporary and go, I don't get what he's talking about. So, No, just this idea of being able to kind of shift backwards in time and catch the sensibility, right?
Yeah, of course. It's like some people, it's like when you watch a black and white movie, sometimes you're like, why are they speaking in this weird cadence? It's hard to get in, but once you do, it's really enjoyable.
My grandkids were once at an age where they asked me and my wife, we were watching some old black and white movie. They said, what was it like growing up in the black and white times? We said, when there was black and white movies? No, before there was color. And they thought literally there was no color in the world. They thought the world was black and white. Well, they were very young at the time, but they're watching it. They're going, oh, wow, everything's in black and white. How strange. Let me ask you, you talk about the sort of traveling in time with the comedy, your own time capsule, which I loved, which is the Chronicles of Federman. What was that like, putting that together and hearing stuff that was, 25, 30 years old?
Well, it was both thrilling and humbling. What can I say? Some of the stuff was not great, but a lot of it was I was really proud of my act. And if I didn't think it was good, I wouldn't have put that out. If I didn't think those jokes still held up on some level. And luckily, very luckily, unlike Bob Hope, I don't do topical material. So a lot of the jokes were stuff about growing up or stuff about getting, cable TV, which cable still exists, kind of. I mean, it's more streaming now. But let me tell you the most absolutely satisfying part of it is I put out this album. This was, for those who don't know, I always thought Warner Brothers was going to come to me when I was a young comedian. I was like, hey, you're great. Let's do a comedy album together like we did with, Bob Newhart and Steve Martin and stuff. So years and years, decades go by, no one approaches me.
No phone call.
Ever. No one's interested in putting out my material. I'm like, oh my God. I didn't want to self-produce an album or anything like that. And then finally, I was like, I had all this material that I had recorded, some of it off of VHS tapes. And there was this new technology where I could take out the hiss, take out the extra noises. So it sounded pretty good. It's pretty good. It was called RX is the company. A little plug. And then once that came along, I was like, all right, let me clean up the audio and then put it out, So it's called, from the earliest routines are from, actually there's stuff from the 70s, but mainly it's from maybe 82 or 3 on.
Yeah.
And, but what's very satisfying is that those recordings show up on something called Sirius XM on their stations, and I get royalties from a company called Sound Exchange.
Wow, okay.
And the Sound Exchange tells you what bits get played.
Oh, nice.
Okay. So already I'm like, okay, first of all, it's amazing I get money, any of that, passive income from something I did years ago.
Yeah.
But here's the crazy thing. A lot of the bits that get played a lot are the oldest bits from the 80s.
Really?
Yeah. That they really resonate with people today, month after month, those bits. So I was like, that's surprising and very satisfying that I'm writing a bit that's kind of a classic.
That's interesting. And there's no way to
that somebody in 2021 would be interested in Kenner Easy Bake Oven material. But anyway, apparently they are.
Right, but is it your speculation? Is it somebody from who grew up then who's just wanting to reminisce, or is it somebody going, "Wow, what is this Kenner Easy Bake Oven thing? I want to hear that again. It makes me laugh."
I don't know. I mean, I have to say the one that gets the most play is a driving thing that still exists today. So that gets the most play, and that was I recorded in 1998. So. So that's already over 22 years old, right? 23 years old.
Yeah.
But that's the one that gets the most because that's about when you go up to there's the left-hand turn arrow.
Yeah.
When you're in the left hand and when it's red and we all line up behind that red arrow and when it turns green, the guy in front never goes immediately. It's like, guys, come on. You have one job. There's not many times in life you're a leader. This is your moment. Keep your head in the game. The people are depending on you. So, and then it goes on and on about so that's just basically that observation, right?
Yeah.
And so that one, so that gets a lot of play still. And I do a thing about McDonald's that's still, McDonald's still exists.
Sure.
Yeah.
Evergreen stuff. That's great.
Yeah, no. So it was very surprising and sort of, in a weird way, sort of negates my overall premise about stand-up, that it tends to be generational.
Yeah. But maybe it's not a long enough span for that phenomena to kick in yet.
Oh, yeah. Maybe when we get rid of cars and left-hand turn arrows, yeah.
That's right, and McDonald's.
McDonald people will do, what's this guy talking about? This sounds like an English comedian.
Is it old McDonald?
I don't know what this thing. I don't know this restaurant this old dead dude is talking about.
So during the pandemic, have you done Zoom shows?
Of course. Yes.
So what is it like translating to that medium? So that's, again, sort of springboarding to a whole new medium that, there was no anticipation of how is stand-up supposed to work in this medium. Because from the outset, you go, all right, it's two-way communication and whatnot. But when you're talking and there's a bunch of people on Zoom, leaving microphones open and that sort of thing tends to not work out too well. So that all takes adjustment. So how's that been, sort of moving into that?
Well, it's frustrating. It's a frustrating medium because there's so many ways for it to go sideways. And the audio component is the biggest problem. Believe it or not the video.
Really?
So, sometimes there's echoing. Sometimes you hear your voice back to you. So it's tricky, but it got better through the pandemic, and some people were making a lot of money. I'm looking at you, Mike Birbiglia, doing this situation, and I think they cracked it. And again, it's not stand-up directly but it's stand-up-esque. It was, and that there were times when I was performing on Zoom that I would feel like I was getting a little bit of a role and getting a little control over the crowd. Like, that's sort of what stand-up is you sort of like these disparate group of people, and suddenly you're like, you get them all kind of in the same rhythm, and it's, you like corral them.
It was interesting watching people experiment with it. Maria Bamford, I remember early on, she was just in her living room, and she would do a half-hour rehearsal every week or like every day. She was like churning these things out. And I got on it a couple of times just to watch her do it. And
what'd you think? Tell me what you saw.
It is not stand up as we know it. There's just something, it's almost like watching a video of someone doing stand up, even though it's live. Because
there is some juice to the live part of it though, right? It's not like she just clicked on a video.
No, because you're aware that there's an audience out there watching, and so there's that, and there's a little bit of interplay. But when you get into the material part, it was like watching a video presentation of an act. So there was a separation, like watching a set on the Tonight Show or something, almost.
I see.
Without having an actual audience on that side of the camera. I mean, she had, I think, a couple of people in the living room that were running the equipment, and they would laugh. So you got a little bit of that, but it was a very hybrid experience. Not unenjoyable, by the way, but it definitely wasn't.
Right. And I think the comedians that made it that were the most successful. The comedians that made it not like, oh, I'm going to be standing here with a microphone. There's going to be a fake brick wall behind me. I'm just trying to recreate this. Like, I feel like the ones that really like, okay, I'm going to use this box as my canvas, and pictures are going to come up. And I don't know. Comedians have been. This is on one of the themes of my book. When you get around to reading it, is that comedians adapt to technology. We talked about Marshall P. Wilder earlier. Early audio. And then Uncle Josh, and then Cohen on the telephone, and like all of those early comedy recordings. And then obviously a big thing, and I write about it in the book, was microphones.
Yes.
There was stand-ups before microphones. And I think microphones really changed a lot of it, because you could really, like I said, corral the group much more easily and much more effectively if you had audio control over the entire room, and you could speak softly and still be loud. Like that was never before.
Right. Or lean in.
Never could do that before. So now that allowed the comedian a certain authority that you couldn't get before. And I think that really changed it in a huge way.
I think that's probably the biggest breakthrough, right, from an audio standpoint. I mean, getting up on a stage, so you're elevated.
Right. So that was before audio, right? That's before, yeah. Keep going.
Having lighting, so the attention is on you.
Yep.
And so every sort of advance has been how much attention can you put on the performer? Because
the way you say it, it's so embarrassing. It's like, how much attention do these people need? With the lighting and the sound, and everyone shut up and listen to this person. Don't heckle. It's so funny.
It's just, it's funny too, the stuff you learn from people. This was years ago when I was running the comedy club in Seattle, and Kip Adada was a headliner.
Uh-huh.
And he came in and goes, "Hey, can I go down and look at the room?" Because he hadn't been there before. Yeah, okay. So we go down and look at the comedy room. And he goes, "Can you turn on the stage lights for?" Yeah, turn on the stage lights. He goes, he's looking at the stage lights. Is there any way we could go get a couple of pink lights that mix in with those whites? I go, "Yeah, there's a hardware store down the street." He goes, "Okay, let's go." So we go. And he was right. By changing the lighting just subtly enough, it took the garishness out of what was completely white lighting. And this was, a comedy club with no sophisticated lighting.
What year is this?
82.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, it was, the things you learn and then pass along are pretty fascinating to watch.
No, obviously, as the room is set up, I don't know if you're familiar with Todd Glass, but he's noted for how to set up a comedy room and how dark it has to be, and because it's incredible. I mean, I love working those rooms. So, but back to what I was saying earlier, there's been not that many, I guess, really, since the lighting and the microphones changes in the setup. Like those nightclubs in the 30s are not that much different than a comedy club in 2020.
Yeah, I don't know what you would, other than the fact, I guess there's not any cigarette smoke.
Right. And in the alternative rooms, not alcohol served. Like alcohol was a big part of it from the 30s all the way through. I'm sure the club you had in 1982, what was the name of it called?
Comedy Underground.
The Underground, the classic, yeah. So at the Underground, I'm sure there was a drink minimum, right?
Oh, yeah, 2 drink minimum. Absolutely.
So a lot of the juice, like I say in the book, the economic locomotive underpinnings of the comedy boom, which the Comedy Underground was a huge part of, was booze. It was it was basically, if people stopped coming to watch comedians, it would become a karaoke bar, or it would have been a disco. It would have been some other way to sell booze, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Was the Comedy Underground something else before it was a comedy club? Do you know?
That's a great question. I mean, upstairs was a sports bar, right? Swanee's. This was the old location. It's changed locations. And then downstairs, I think, was just a basement.
I love it. I actually like underground comedy clubs.
Well, it's like the Punchline. The Punchline in San Francisco used to be the dressing room for the old Waldorf.
Of course. But I like especially, I don't know if you've ever been to the Comedy Works in Denver, or the Comedy Cellar in New York. Like, I like when you go down into the dreads, the thing with the exposed pipe and the rats, and that's where comedy. Dave Attell is hanging out smoking. It's the greatest.
What I liked about the boom, because by the mid 80s, it was already turning on, right? And we would have a line down the block.
Yep.
And I would have people come down those stairs and literally have people look at me and go, "Who are we seeing tonight?" They didn't care who it was. They saw a line outside. They knew it was comedy, and they knew it had to probably be good.
I know. It was really interesting. And the comedians that could draw people were making a lot of money, like Rich Scheidner and Jenny and Seinfeld and Leno and those guys.
Yeah,
Lane Boosler.
We had Jerry there. I mean, early on, way before his show, of course. Paul Reiser, Perry Anderson. All these big names, and they loved playing a town like Seattle because.
That's a legendary room. That's and it also, I mean, there's such a big area it drew from, and.
Do you have bookings to go back out, to start going back out?
Yes. I got a couple of things. I got Arizona and Florida in the fall, but nothing in the over the summer. I'm still waiting for it. I mean, Broadway, I just heard, is coming back. I just read that on the way over here.
Oh, that's good.
In September, 100% capacity.
Wow, no kidding.
Yeah, in New York. So that's very exciting.
And what about the classes you're teaching? Those have been Zoom classes?
Yeah, not great. Not great.
No.
I mean, I've done the best I can, and I'm not that good a teacher to begin with, so it's.
It really is interesting. What's interesting
I get exposed a little bit on Zoom.
What's interesting is, because my work, I work at this branding studio, and we haven't been in the office since March. I mean,
did you say branding studio?
Branding studio, yes.
I love it. I like the way you say it, like, I work at a branding studio.
Yeah, I work at
that's a job a lot lot have.
I create brand names. What can I say?
I understand, but this is studio is funny to me. Go ahead.
So, but we've now learned to work this way over.
Yeah, of course. A lot of people have. Yeah.
And it's not altogether unpleasant. It lacks certain interactions and things. But what was interesting was teaching improv this way, which I've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's much the same sort of restrictions of, well, what can you do? First of all, nobody has legs.
Right.
Everyone is seen from about the neck up. And so, you'd indicated earlier just this little box that we're talking in. And that became the improv exercise room was, what can we do that fits in this frame? And so it's interesting to watch people now beginning to finally get to expand beyond the frame again. And some people are, don't adjust quickly to things, and they got used to doing this. Mm-hmm. And now they're going, oh, wait a minute. I can walk around now. I could go outside and whatnot.
People do improv outside. Interesting.
I'm curious to see what audiences will be like, and it's
going to be great. It's going to be great. Audiences are going to be key to see comedy and feel it. It's going to be really good.
I think it will too.
Yeah. I mean, I can't guarantee it, but I have to assume there's a pent up demand just to get out.
And think of the COVID material that's just dying to be told on stage.
Well, hopefully we'll get past that.
I hope so. Yeah. What else have you been up to? I mean, are you writing during this time?
Well, I wrote a book called The History of Sound.
Yes. That's out there. That's out there.
Yes. I did write a little. I'm working on a documentary for HBO, co-directed by Judd Apatow.
Oh, nice.
On a stand-up comedian named George Carlin, who worked from about 1959, teamed up with his buddy Jack Burns till June 2008 when he died. Yeah. He had a really long run, incredible comedian, and I am just so honored. I know it sounds goofy. I know it's a stupid, dumb honor to be doing this, but I am. I'm just like, I can't believe I get to work on this thing.
Oh, it's amazing.
It's just thrilling. It's been just thrilling. So that's been a big thing I've been doing during, a lot of the shutdown.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it. I think I read about that project happening, and it's very exciting. I mean, I was a huge Carlin fan. So that's going to be very interesting. I can hardly wait to see that.
Yeah. I keep finding new stuff. It's just great. He's what a genius. 9th grade dropout, by the way.
Wow.
Yeah.
That figures.
Hated authority. Hated it. And then, believe it or not, went into the Air Force. But he had a very specific plan. He wanted to go to the Air Force, join up so he wasn't drafted, get out by the time he was 21 or 22, and then on the GI Bill, learn to become a DJ. That was his plan. Perfect. Yeah, very smart. But he was, what a comedian. 14 HBO specials. That's amazing. And did they get bitter towards the lst few? Very angry. Yeah, I know. We talk about that. Yeah, he was it was this weird anger. There's one where he's like I don't know if you even know this, but there was one he was going to do right before 9/11 called "I Like It When a Lot of People Die."
I do remember that.
You remember that? And then he had to change it to grievances or something like that.
Yeah.
Like had to rebrand it because even the great George Carlin was like, I don't think I can.
Trouble selling that one.
At the Beacon Theater in New York City, like 3 miles away from, Ground Zero. So
do you guys,
he was incredible.
Do you guys talk to Dennis Blair as part of this?
Yes.
Documentary?
Yes, we did.
Just because Dennis opened for him for years.
Yes, he did. You know who opened for him before Dennis Blair? This is going to be a great comedy trivia question for you.
Who? Glenn
Super. Does that name mean anything?
Yeah, with the megaphone.
Mr. Megaphone.
Megaphone.
Classic 80s comic. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember him asking for a table.
He's no longer alive, unfortunately.
I know that.
But he had that act was really funny.
I did not. Maybe I didn't know he opened for Carlin. You mentioned it.
Yeah, it seemed like an odd choice, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Seemed like an odd choice, but no, I'm really enjoying that. And then, and now I'm starting to audition for. As a matter of fact, I'll say right now, tomorrow in this very room that you see behind me,
yes,
no one else can see it, but we're doing this on Zoom. I'll be auditioning for. I have an NDA. I can't say what it's for. Okay, but I'm just auditioning.
But is it a project you're excited about?
Yes, very excited.
Okay,
very excited.
All right. I just want to hear that. Well, good.
I've been doing. Acting is a big. I really miss it. I like acting very much too. So,
yeah.
I don't know this. I studied acting, so
I like that. That's good.
Stella Adler, little Stella.
That's good. I'm waiting to hear on some writing stuff. This is so funny. I sold these scripts to Hallmark 20 years ago.
20.
Yeah. They made 3 of them. But they bought 6 of them. And now I've got somebody who was involved as a producer at that production company wanting to know. He says, "Do you still have the rights to those things? Can you get it back from them?" I go, "Yeah, I think I can." Because now he's got to deal with like a big production company. And,
okay, look at you.
Yeah. So
keep Wayne Federman in mind. I'll do a little part. That's my thing.
Wayne, you're always.
Thank you. Well, obviously, this book is indirectly you're responsible for this book.
Well,
I love it.
I just the contacts that we make, and it goes across podcasts too. Like I said, you were on with the Sklar's and whatnot, and just the podcast community in a lot of ways to me reminds me of the comedy sort of community.
Right.
I've made friends with guys that live in Australia and England, and I've never met them, and I've involved them in other projects, audio projects and stuff, and we'll talk on Zoom or Skype or whatever, and it's like a weird little fraternity of people doing this, and which makes me wonder: are you going to get back into the podcast bit?
Yes. Yeah. Good question.
Because you've had several of them.
Well, really good question. I've only had 2. It's not several, just a couple.
Well, doesn't several edge into?
Nope. I don't think. I think several means minimum 3. Please tweet me if I'm wrong. And just so you know, Mark, I'm wrong quite a bit. So, but I believe several means it has to be at least 3. But I've done 2. I've done one, which was the book came out of the history of stand-up. We're going to start a new season, our 3rd season.
Nice.
Probably in a couple weeks.
Okay.
Probably come out July or August.
And I'll probably review it.
I know. You've been so nice to me. I can't even feel terrible now. And then my first podcast, which was called Human Conversation, which you also reviewed.
Yes, and I loved the premise. Well, go ahead and talk about it.
No, you tell me what the premise. I feel like I'm talking too much on this thing.
No, the element of the premise I loved was the fact you guys would not look anything up.
Yep.
And then you would do a fact check the next episode you did a fact check?
Yeah, the next episode, yeah.
And so you would then have all the facts down, and it was really funny seeing how close you guys would come to the stuff you were putting out. It was
right. We wanted it brain to brain. No looking up.
And who was your partner on that?
It's Erin McGaffey.
Erin McGaffey. Yeah.
And so she lives in Ireland now.
Oh.
And so I said, I don't want to do this thing over. It's just stupid. But I feel like the technology's increased a little bit, and now we can do it. So that's going to start up as well. So they're both back. They're both back.
That's great.
Needless to say, neither one of the podcasts really broke through on any huge level, but they were really fun and creative, and I loved doing them.
Well, it's interesting too, because when those, not so much the history of stand-up, but the other podcast came out at a time that sort of, podcasts have been sort of swelling under the surface, and now they've just sort of turned into this whole other animal because there's all this.
Yeah, you've been here for the whole thing. I want to talk to you about that a little bit. I feel like it was like, how big can it get? I feel like major media, like every big age, CAA, they all have podcast divisions now and things like that.
Yeah, and what it reminds me of, and it's sort of interesting because there's a little bit of a shadow of sort of the comedy evolution here. Is it reminds me of the early days of radio. Because when radio first started, everybody had a radio station in their basement. And they would...
You're talking about in the 1920s.
In the 1920s. And their signal went like a mile.
Yep.
And they would play music or talk. It was just like podcasts. They would talk about whatever they wanted to do. There was no FCC. There was nobody to tell them to stop doing that. And then there was an FCC. And they began slicing up the airwaves. And all of a sudden, if you had a little dinky radio station, well, now you were stepping on somebody's property. I put in air quotes, right? And so everything started to get gobbled up from an airwave standpoint. And the only people that could afford them were big corporations like Westinghouse and the companies that started real big radio shows, right? Philco, NBC, all these big broadcasters. And, within 10 years, all the little guys were gone. All those little stations were gone. There was no room.
There was still local radio stations.
There was local radio, but there wasn't a guy in a basement.
Wasn't a guy in a basement. Okay.
Doing a show. There wasn't a guy sitting in his wife's office talking to a comedy friend.
Right.
They could put a podcast out, right? And so that. Unfortunately, I get this sort of chill feeling that's going in that direction because now there's giant.
And didn't you have a radio show in the 20s, if I'm not mistaken? You had a little thing that you used to do. Wasn't it Mark in the family room? No, not the family, the parlor. Mark in the parlor. I'm trying to get the right term.
I actually did.
I remember that.
I did do a show from Paradise, California on KNVR, The Rock from the Ridge, but that was a long time ago. Okay. But yes, where it's kind of going. And I do see that given the sort of splintered nature of the internet, maybe these little podcasts will keep going. But to a large degree, will there be anyone to listen to them?
Right. I hear what you're saying. You're like looking right at me and saying, human conversation is probably going to get crushed by some big thing.
No, I don't think it will because you're Wayne Federman, God.
Oh, my God. Thank you for saying
exactly. And people will be just clamoring that it's coming back. They're going to love it.
No, it's I don't know. I'm just fascinated by podcasts. Every time I think it can't get any bigger, it gets bigger. That's the way it looks like to me. It's just like, I can't possibly. And then who has time? I mean, you review them. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of them, not millions.
And they just keep coming out.
Yeah.
It's not
and how do you do that? I'm sorry. This is enough about me. How do you do that? Who decides which ones you're going to review?
All the reviewers on This Week in Comedy podcast decide what they're going to review.
They just do it. Okay. So it's personal.
We have a round robin letter that goes out so we don't step on each other's toes. And we suggest shows that somebody might want to catch because we only really review one a piece. And so if a couple of great shows come out, we go, hey, can somebody cover this Conan interview?
I gotcha.
That sort of thing.
And do you... All right.
But I listen to a bunch of them to decide what I'm going to do.
Just let's get into it. Yeah, do you do 1.5 speed? What's your technique to get through these things?
I listen at regular speed.
What?
Until I get bored.
Oh, okay.
Until I get bored. And it's amazing how quickly some of these things.
Yeah, of course.
And the other funny sort of parallel is nighttime talk show television because a lot of guests are now making the rounds. If they have a movie coming out, or say they have a book about stand-up comedy coming out, they'll make the rounds and they'll appear on a number of podcasts.
Yes, of course.
And so almost like that, you've got to have kind of, so you've been on a number of shows, right? Talking about the book.
I've done it. Yes. There's still a few I'm trying to get on, but yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So are there stories you kind of, hold for one particular show? Do you tell the story?
Oh, then now I sort of base it on what somebody asks me and try to be in the moment there, as opposed to, I'm saving this for. No, I don't think I. Yeah. Like it all depends. It all depends on the person interviewing me.
I got you. How am I doing?
Yeah,
that's what I thought.
I just made the face. You're doing great. This is zooming by. This is I feel like we haven't really had like a moment where we're like, okay, what else do I need to know? Like if we go from subject to subject pretty seamlessly here.
Well, that's what we try to do.
Yeah, no, actually I'm going to finally I've never done Jesse's podcast.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, that'll be fun.
It's called The Big One.
Yeah.
So
that's a good one. I like listening to his show.
Hopefully it's going to be about my Kenner Easy Bake Oven bit.
Now, I wonder if he gets pissed off that his show doesn't get reviewed on.
Oh, you won't review his show?
Well, I don't think he's allowed to because it's
it's his own network. Right?
And I can't get Succotash reviewed on that column.
Of course, it's a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Look at the way it works, guys. Somebody has ethics in media.
I've even had some of my own reviewers on as guests on my show just to rub their face in.
Okay, let me ask you another question. Yeah. How many reviewers are in your group? Is it 6?
It's kind of a rotating stable of about 6 to 8.
Okay, 6 to 8. Is there who's like the star? Who is like the kid who's just like, oh my God, writing or his writing is so interesting and really taking reviewing to a new level?
Given the length of the reviews we're able to do, I don't think anybody's kind of.
Nobody stood out.
It's 200. It's 200 words. It's kind of hard to kind of make.
Oh, that's your maximum, 200 words. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a bit hard to do. And some people just don't review every week, and some people just sort of drift away, and it's kind of weird. So, I've been there, I think, the longest as far as a consistent reviewer. Seen people turn over and whatnot. And now they pay us, so that's nice.
Look at that. Oh, somebody is monetizing podcasting.
Oh, yeah, it's coming in hot and heavy now. I guess I've kept you long enough, first of all, and we could go all night if we wanted to.
Of course. It's a podcasting. No one cares. You go to 1.5, they just turned it, I assume. Anyway. I don't assume anything. Hopefully who's ever listening finds this moment right now fascinating.
There you go. But with this long telescope on the history of stand-up, what do you kind of see if you turn the scope the other way, heading towards the future? What's
That's the one question I won't answer. That's the one thing. I mean, I said earlier that I think there's going to be a great comedy renaissance. So that's the most I will say because I don't. I'm a look back guy. I'm not a look forward, and I find that most people that look forward are wrong. So that's
you don't want to be on the hook for that.
No. It's not even that. I just feel like there's 100,000 great stories to talk about in stand up, and I don't want to make it about my conjecture of what is going to happen with
That's fair
Whitney Cummings in the next year. Who knows?
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
All right, so the book is The History of Stand-Up.
From Mark Twain to Dave Chappelle.
And then it ends. That's it.
And then I write in the book, I go, the next comedy historian will tell what happened. There's already been something that's happened since the book came out.
Oh.
And that is Clubhouse.
Oh,
Are you familiar with it?
I am. I'm a proud member of Clubhouse.
Okay. Yes. There's already comedians that sort of have made, young comedians that have sort of made that their thing and have become very successful on it. Not even mentioned in my book. And I mentioned Twitch. I mentioned Instagram Live. So it's that's how fast comedians adapt. I said early in that comedians are like pornographers. We adapt to new technologies.
I Absolutely. Are you?
We're in. It's
Are you on Clubhouse? Are you on Clubhouse?
I am. I haven't really, as always. I've not.
I've only
haven't maximized any of it. I've minimized it. I would say
there's a room called what's it called? It's a comedy lounge, I think, that I've sort of sat in and just sort of. I love like just kind of when I'm working at my desk, just sort of listening to the conversations.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm fascinated by it. I'm fascinated. So
it's interesting. So okay.
So that's happened since the book's been published on. It's been out a month now.
Yeah. Books available everywhere books are available.
Yeah, you can order it. If you don't want to do it through Amazon or you hate them, you can just order it from a local bookstore. They will get it for you.
Yeah, I have it on Kindle. I have it on
You got iPad. The Kindle?
Yeah, I have it on my iPad right now. It's right in front of me.
Oh, my God. You can click on, it doesn't matter. on the bibliography, I have a number of books.
I saw that. That's very cool.
No, I'm very proud of it. Tell me if there's anything you don't like. Please tell me.
I will, and I will finish it. Like I said, I only bought it a day ago, and I've gotten through the first 2 chapters. But the thing I was going to mention before I let you go about it is It's because I know you.
Yep.
When I read it, I definitely hear your voice.
Oh, thank you. I feel like that's a compliment. Am I right?
It is. I mean, there are certain lines when you close like a passage, I go, man, that is pure Federman.
Good. I actually was going for that because I zoom through the whole history of stand-up. It's not a long read. It's like, you'll see. But I wanted to make it in kind of a casual, right now there might be people listening to this like, I don't want to hear this voice. I don't want to read this voice. This voice is kind of annoying. But for those who like Wayne Federman's rhythm thank you. That is
you really did capture
Mark, come on. I didn't expect that.
No.
That's nice.
And did you do an audio version of this?
I have. It's not released yet. Okay. Not released. I'm holding that back a little bit.
All right. Anyway, so definitely get the book, The History of Stand-Up. It is a quick read, I can already tell, but it's also a really interesting read. I mean, if
you're into stand-up history, I think you would really like it. And there's some people in there besides Marshall P. Wilder, like that I think have not gotten their due that I sort of highlight a little bit.
Yeah,
Wally Bogue is one of them.
And I would even counter the idea that even if you're not like a fan or a student of comedy, the idea that you see what's happening on the comedy fringes of society through this very long period of American history from where you started is really interesting to see, because comedy is oftentimes a reflection of the times. And then to see it sort of presented in this way is very fascinating, because we're now seeing the times reflected in the comedy through this book.
Always.
Which is really interesting. Really interesting. So
no, and I try, if there's one theme to the book, it's that I try to connect it all. So when I see Amber Ruffin doing political comedy, I'm like, oh, that's something Will Rogers did.
Yes.
So it's like, again, they do it in a different style. I'm not saying go listen to Will Rogers is the only way to enjoy political, but just like, I like connecting it all. Like, let me give you another example. Yeah. I mean, they don't host the Oscars anymore, but Will Rogers was the first one to ever comedian to host the Academy Awards.
Yeah, you mentioned that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's very cool. And you mentioned that Kevin Hart was the last comedian to not host the Oscars.
He was the first. No, but it was just like an interesting, like that's something Alan King did. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's the whatever that guy is, the funny guy and an award show.
Yes.
So maybe it's not the Academy Awards. Maybe it's Ricky Gervais hosting the Golden Globes. But it's the same thing that Will Rogers started. Like, let's get a funny guy up here as opposed to...
Well, the comedian's the ultimate palate cleanser. You know, if the act before is kind of brings the room down, the comic can bring it up. If the act before was up, the comic can kind of keep the flow going. So a comic's kind of that ideal host person in a situation like that. So it makes tons of sense.
Well, yeah. I mean, look no further than Johnny Carson.
Exactly. Wayne, it's been a delight and far too short. I'm planning to get to LA soon now that I'm vaxxed up.
Yes.
And let's do the hang.
And can I say once again, thank you for starting me on this journey, hooking me up with Meg at Split Cider.
Of course. And
I should. I'm going to amend the acknowledgments and put you in there and further in other editions.
Don't even worry about it.
No, it's incredible. It's incredible. I do now kind of remember this whole thing that you were like, oh yeah. Yeah. Now I teach. It's incredible. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure. And look forward to seeing you again soon.
Friends, summer is just around the corner, so you might be thinking to yourself, gosh, it's time to get out the suntan lotion, rubber thongs, and good old Bermuda shorts. Stop right there, Pilgrim. Did you know that every time you slip on a pair of their shorts, the British Protectorate of Bermuda receives a 2-cent royalty? That's right, which is why Henderson's Pants, a loyal and legal corporate entity of these United States since 1896, is introducing their Wake Island abbreviated trousers. Roomy and comfortable like the Bermuda shorts you've come to love, but with the freedom that comes from knowing you won't be helping out the subjects of our former British oppressors. The stylish Wake Island abbreviated trousers are named for the unincorporated tiny landmass in the North Pacific, which is a legal U.S. protectorate. Now, when those hot, sticky days of summer hit, slip on a pair of Henderson's Wake Island abbreviated trousers and go for a stroll on the beach, around the pool, or through the mall. Feel free to wear briefs, boxers, or nothing at all under your new, snazzy, and 100% American abbreviated trousers, because, as a U.S. citizen, you have the right to stow your junk any way you choose. Originally designed for the U.S. Department of Immigration, trout farmers, and dark, seedy theaters, that's Henderson's Wake Island abbreviated trousers, available wherever things you put your legs into are sold. And now back to more of Succotash.
Thanks to Wayne Federman for the visit. Love that guy. You can get his book, The History of Stand-Up, pretty much everywhere, but I'll throw a link to where it lives on Amazon up on our home site at succotashshow.com. When we hit our 10-year anniversary last month, I thought it was a good time to bring back the tweet sack. Yes, I know you're happy to get out of that grungy bag, Tweety. And so here's a rundown of the folks and bots so kind to mention, tag, reply, DM, or somehow get our handle into their socials. Mad Maddie, the Jock Doc podcast. Hey, I was just a guest on the JDP, but I'll tell you more about that when the episode gets a little closer to the drop date. Blazed, Screams and Moans, Charlie Miller, Misfit Scully, Bob Saget, Salty Language Pod, Juliet Miranda, The Amazing Nerd Show, St. Paul Filmcast, Odd Dad Out, Run With Me Pod, The Shiznit Show, Jan Ardent Pod, Quadfather MFT, Rough Giraffe Pod, Morning Neuroses, Nikolai's Kitchen, Sunpower Pod, Afterburn 739, and Listen Brilliant. That's going to do it for this extra long episode 252 of Succotash. Thanks again to Wayne Federman, and of course, to you. If you like the show, please feel free to jump over to Apple Podcasts to rate and review us in a favorable way. And if you're a comedy soundcaster and would like to get a clip on our show, hang on for Bill Heywatt's wrap-up to get details on just how you can make that happen. Tyson Saner will be cruising this feed next week with a passle of clips for you. Until then, if someone should happen to approach you and ask if you've heard anything good lately, won't you please pass the succotash?
You've been listening to Succotash, the comedy soundcast, with your host, Marc Hershon. Brought to you by Henderson's Pants and...
Imagine your company's name right here.
Rate us and review us at Apple and Google Podcasts. Find us on the web at succotashshow.com, on Spotify, on Stitcher, on iHeartRadio, on YouTube,
on SoundCloud,
and wherever fine soundcasts are streamed and or downloaded. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Succotash Show. Like us on Facebook. email us at marc@succotashshow.com, or call into the Succotash Skype line at our toll call number 818-921-7212.
That number again is 818-921-7212.
You can also upload clips from your favorite comedy soundcasts directly to us using our direct upload link at hightail.com/u/Succotash. Succotash is produced and engineered by Joe Paulino through the auspices of Studio P Sausalito, the home of the hit. Our hosts are Marc Hershon and Tyson Saner. Our musical director is
Scott Carvey.
Our booth assistant is
Kenny Durges.
Succotash is executive produced by Marc Hershon. Until next time, I'm your loyal booth announcer, Bill Heywatt, reminding you to please pass the Succotash. Goodbye. This has been a Succotash Patch production.